The air was thick and heavy with the scent of alien flowers. Strange glowing plants twisted upward like frozen flames, their petals dripping with silver dew. Ethan moved carefully, scanning the shadows between the tall stalks. This jungle planet, known as Verith, was beautiful but deadly. The ground itself seemed alive, and danger could strike from anywhere. Behind him, the small alien research team followed in silence. They were here to collect rare medicinal plants that only grew in the Forbidden Zone, a part of the jungle where even the bravest hunters never stayed long. Ethan had been hired as their human guide because he knew how to survive in dangerous worlds. Among the team was Lyra, a young alien girl with pale silver skin and deep violet eyes. Her people, the Aeronal, were known for their fragile immune systems. One sting or bite from the wrong creature could be fatal for them. That was why everyone kept close to the marked safe paths. But fate did not care about safe paths. It happened in seconds. Ethan was scanning a cluster of tall ferns when he heard a sharp, high-pitched cry behind him. He spun around, and his blood ran cold. A massive serpent-like alien creature had burst from the foliage, its body covered in iridescent scales. Its head was shaped like a jagged spear, and its long fangs dripped with green venom that hissed when it hit the ground. The snake had already struck. Lyra was on the ground, clutching her leg, her face twisted in pain. The others froze in shock, their eyes wide with fear. No, not that snake. One of the alien researchers gasped, stumbling backward. That venom kills in minutes. She's doomed. Ethan didn't waste time arguing. He dropped to his knees beside Lyra. The puncture wounds were deep and dark. Green liquid was already spreading through her veins beneath the skin. Her breathing was ragged. "It burns," she whispered, her voice shaking. The other aliens were panicking, shouting that nothing could save her. Some even stepped away, afraid the venom might somehow affect them. Ethan's jaw tightened. He knew enough about snake bites on Earth. Sometimes you could slow the spread by removing as much venom as possible. He looked at Lyra's terrified eyes. "Hold still," he said firmly. Without thinking twice, he pressed his mouth over the wound and began to suck. The taste hit him instantly, metallic, bitter, and burning like acid. His tongue felt numb and his throat tightened, but he kept going, spitting the venom onto the ground, then drawing out more. Lyra whimpered in pain, but didn't pull away. "Human, stop," one of the aliens shouted. "That venom will kill you too." Ethan ignored them. He could feel his own lips tingling, his vision beginning to blur slightly. But he refused to stop until fresh blood came from the wound instead of the thick, green liquid. When he was sure he had taken out as much as he could, he tied a strip of cloth tightly above the bite to slow the spread. His head was spinning, but he forced himself to stand. "We need to move," he said, his voice hoarse. He lifted Lyra into his arms. She felt too light, her body trembling. The jungle seemed darker now, the air heavier. Every step was a struggle. Ethan's muscles ached, and his heartbeat was too fast, but he kept going. They weren't far from the safe zone, but on Verith, even a short distance could feel endless. The sound of rustling leaves followed them. At first, Ethan thought it was the wind, but then he heard it again, soft, deliberate, almost like footsteps. He glanced over his shoulder. Between the glowing plants, something moved. Shadow, tall and lean, keeping pace with them. Its eyes caught the faint light, glowing a deep, amber dot predator. Ethan tightened his grip on Lyra. She was still conscious, her head resting weakly against his shoulder, but her breathing was shallow. The other aliens whispered nervously. "Something is following us." Ethan didn't answer. If it was what he thought, speaking might give it a reason to rush them. The rustling grew closer. Whatever it was not afraid of the group. It was tracking the weak and the wounded. And right now, that was both him and Lyra. A distant growl rolled through the air, low and deep. They needed shelter. Fast, in the distance. Ethan saw the silhouette of an old outpost, half-claps, covered in vines. It wasn't much, but it had walls, and walls were better than nothing. As they hurried toward it, the shadow followed, closing the distance step by step, and then, just as Ethan reached the broken door, the predator stopped in the darkness dash, watching. Ethan met its glowing eyes for a long, tense moment. Neither moved. The jungle was silent, except for Lyra's faint breaths. He stepped inside the outpost, shutting what was left of the door behind him. But in his mind, he knew. That thing wasn't going away. It was waiting. Inside the outpost, the air was stale and smelled of rust. The walls were cracked, and the metal beams groaned with every gust of wind from the jungle outside. Ethan set Lyra down on an old supply bench, his breath uneven. His arms ached from carrying her, but the strange heat in his veins was worse. The other aliens crowded near the doorway, still shaken. They whispered among themselves, their eyes darting between Lyra's pale face and Ethan's unsteady posture. One of them, a tall Aeronal male, finally spoke. "Human, you are poisoned too. Your kind is not immune." "That serpent's venom, I know," Ethan interrupted, his voice sharp but weak. He could feel the tingling in his lips, the numbness creeping up his jaw. His vision swam slightly, and his chest felt tight. Still, he refused to lie down. Lyra's breathing was shallow, her skin turning a bluish shade beneath the silver. She tried to speak, but only managed a soft rasp. Ethan knelt beside her, checking the cloth he'd tied above her wound. It had slowed the spread, but not stopped it. "We need an antidote," he said, scanning the dusty shelves for anything useful. The outpost had clearly been abandoned for years. Most of the medkits were empty, their contents either used or spoiled long ago. From outside came the faint sound of movement. The predator was still there, pacing, its claws scraping lightly against stone. The noise sent a ripple of unease. Through the group, one alien researcher stepped forward nervously. "If we call for rescue now, it will be hours before they can reach us. We might not survive that long." Ethan clenched his jaw. "Then we buy time." He moved to the corner, where a stack of old crates sat. Breaking one open with his boot, he found a rusted metal pot and a small camping stove. With quick, practiced hands, he set it up and started boiling water from his canteen. "What are you doing?" the tall Aeronal asked. "Making something too." "Slow the venom," Ethan replied. "We used to use this on Earth for snake bites when there was no antivenom nearby. It's not perfect, but it might keep her alive long enough." His fingers trembled as he crushed dry jungle leaves into the saw. Only Ruby Kiss has the luxurious texture. That may be tough, maybe solid bade, and leaves a rich, long-lasting color. It's not well-lasting color. It's not perfect. By Lel may laugh. It's sullied by Lel. May laugh, so re-laugh, may laugh, may see prelide et la, may lev, may like lab. They may unlad lass it, they not lied it is it, ho lied it cock amax it's it to be so co cuss it les, sick it to petit to by goes it guy it's it is hit up pot. They weren't from Earth, but earlier in the expedition, he'd studied their properties. One of them could act as a mild toxin neutralizer. Lyra's half-lidded eyes followed his movements. "You should rest," she murmured weakly. He shook his head. "Not until you're safe." The numbness in his mouth had spread down his throat now. Every swallow felt like it was dragging gravel over his tongue. He spat on the floor and saw a faint green tinsum venom still lingered in his system. Ethan dipped a clean cloth into the boiling mixture and pressed it gently to the wound on Lyra's leg. She hissed in pain, but didn't pull away. "It's going to burn," he warned. "That means it's working." As the bitter scent of the herb filled the air, the jungle outside fell too quiet. The predator's pacing stopped. Ethan's instincts screamed that this wasn't good. Silence in Vareth's jungle meant one of two things. Either the predator had left, or it was closer than they thought. A faint thud echoed from the roof. Above them, dust fell from the ceiling. The aliens froze. One whispered. Ethan grabbed his rifle and moved toward the center of the room. His eyes on the cracked ceiling panels. His heartbeat pounded in his ears, not only from fear, but from the venom's effect. Another thud. This one, closer to the door. Then, nothing. Ethan stayed perfectly still, listening. The silence stretched until it felt like a weight pressing on his chest. Then, suddenly, a long, low growl came from right outside the thin metal door. The sound was so deep it seemed to vibrate through the floor. Lyra flinched, and Ethan stepped between her and the entrance. The predator's shadow shifted, and the faint glow coming through the cracks was massive, its elongated head almost brushing the top of the doorway. Its amber eyes burned like small suns. One of the aliens let out a sharp breath, and the creature's gaze snapped toward the sound. It leaned closer, its nostrils flaring. "It smells the blood," Ethan said in a low voice. "Everyone, stay still." The predator didn't attack. It simply stood there, watching. Ethan realized with dread that it was waiting for them to weaken further. Predators like this one didn't waste energy. They struck when their prey couldn't fight back. Minutes crawled by like hours. Ethan's legs felt heavier with each passing second. The venom in his system made his vision flicker, but he kept his rifle steady. Finally, the predator stepped back into the jungle darkness. Ethan didn't relax. He knew it would return. He turned to check on Lyra. Her breathing was a little steadier, but she was still dangerously weak. "We have to get out of here before it comes back," he said. One alien shook his head. "If we leave, it will hunt us in the open." Ethan glanced at the small window slit near the ceiling. "Then we don't leave the way it expects." Lyra's tired voice broke the tense silence. You're risking your life for me." "Why?" He met her gaze. "Because no one else would." Her eyes softened, and for a moment she looked less like a dying alien and more like someone holding on to hope for the first time in her life. Outside, in the shadows, the predator growled again. This time, it sounded impatient, and Ethan knew they didn't have much time left. The old outpost seemed smaller now, its rusted walls closing in as the night deepened. A faint greenish glow seeped in through the cracks in the metal sheets, casting eerie patterns across the floor. Ethan sat against the wall, rifle resting on his knees, eyes locked on the doorway. Every sound outside felt sharper, heavier. Lyra lay on the bench where he had placed her earlier. Her skin was clammy, but the bluish tint had faded slightly. The herbal compress seemed to be slowing the venom. Even so, she was far from safe. The other aliens huddled in the far corner, whispering in low, fearful voices. None dared raise their head near the window, slit, whatever stalked. Them out there had senses far sharper than their own. Then came the sound again, slow, deliberate footsteps in the dirt outside. Not the quick patter of a jungle scavenger, but the heavy, confident pace of something that feared nothing. Ethan's grip on the rifle tightened. "It's back," he murmured. The steps stopped just beyond the doorway. A shadow shifted in the faint moonlight. Two glowing amber eyes appeared, unblinking, watching them from the dark. The predator was almost as tall as the doorway itself. Lyra stirred weakly, sensing its presence. Her hand moved slightly toward Ethan, as if trying to make sure he was still. There, the creature stepped forward, revealing its jagged silhouette. Its head was elongated with a crown of bony ridges that shimmered faintly in the dark. Its movements were unnervingly slow, like it knew they had nowhere to run. Ethan raised the rifle, but didn't fire. He knew the door wouldn't hold if the creature charged. If he shot now, he'd be forcing the fight too soon. Suddenly, there was a soft scrape above them. Ethan's eyes darted upward. More footsteps on the roof. His blood went cold. "There's more than one," he whispered. The other aliens stiffened, fear written across their faces. A low growl vibrated through the floor as the predator at the door pressed its snout against the metal, sniffing. It inhaled deeply, then exhaled with a hiss, fogging the cold air. Ethan's mind raced. They couldn't outfight multiple predators, not with him and Lyra both weakened. They needed a distraction, something to break the standoff. He glanced around the room. In the corner sat an old fuel canister, dented but still sealed. If it still held liquid, he could use it to create a makeshift fire trap. The problem was getting to it without drawing attention. He slowly leaned toward. "Lyra, stay quiet. No matter what happens, don't move." She gave a faint nod, her violet eyes locking on his face. Ethan slid along the wall, each movement deliberate and silent. But halfway across the room, the predator outside suddenly went still. It tilted its head as if listening, then took a single step forward, its claws scraping the ground. The sound made Lyra flinch. The creature's gaze snapped toward, her movement in. That instant, Ethan acted. He lunged for the fuel canister, grabbed it, and rolled back toward the center of the room. The noise made the predator let out a low snarl. But it didn't break through, not yet. He popped the cap on the canister, the sharp smell of fuel filling the air. He splashed a line of it across the doorway, and then lit a flare from his belt. The sudden burst of light turned the interior red and orange, shadows leaping like flames on the walls. The predator outside hissed and stepped back from the heat, but it didn't leave. Instead, it began circling, looking for another way in. Above them, the second predator moved again, closer to the center of the roof. Ethan cursed under his breath. He'd bought them a few minutes, maybe less. Then, without warning, a loud crash split the air. The roof panel above the far wall caved in, and a massive clawed limb punched through the metal. The second predator was forcing its way inside. The aliens in the corner screamed and scrambled back. Ethan swung the rifle toward the opening and fired. The shot roared in the confined space, the recoil jarring his weakened arms. The creature snarled, pulling back, but not far enough to give up. Lyra's voice came, weak but urgent. "Human, use the flare. Throw it outside." Ethan understood immediately. The firelight would draw their attention, maybe lure them away. Long enough to escape. He grabbed the still-burning flare and hurled it through the doorway. It landed in the dirt outside, sending sparks and smoke into the air. The predator at the door turned sharply toward the light, its body lowering into a stalking posture. Slowly, it began to move after the flare. The one on the roof hesitated, then followed its packmate into the darkness. For a few precious moments, the jungle fell silent again. Ethan lowered his rifle, his chest heaving. His muscles felt like lead, and the burning heat of the venom in his veins made every heartbeat painful. But they were alive for now. Lyra looked at him, her voice barely more than a whisper. "You, keep risking yourself." He gave her a faint smile, though his lips were pale. "Guess it's a human thing." She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, quietly, she said, "If we live, I owe you more than I can repay." Ethan didn't reply. He just listened to the distant growls fading into The jungle, knowing they would return, and when they did, he would be ready. The jungle night outside was deceptively calm. The predators had melted into the darkness, but Ethan knew they hadn't gone far. They were waiting, circling, learning. That was the worst thing about Verith's hunters. They were patient. They didn't make mistakes. Ethan's vision swam as he leaned against the wall. The venom in his blood felt like molten fire running through his veins. His arms were heavy, his breathing too fast. Still, he forced himself to focus. Lyra's violet eyes followed him weakly from the bench. Her breathing was steadier now, but the wound on her leg still looked angry and swollen. Without a proper antidote, she wouldn't last long. And the truth was, neither would he. "We can't stay," Ethan said, his voice hoarse but firm. One of the alien researchers, slender and pale, looked at him like he'd gone insane. "Leave, in the middle of the night. Those things are out there. They'll tear us apart before we reach the safe zone. They'll tear us apart if we don't move," Ethan shot back. "We're boxed in here. No supplies, no medkits. And they're smart enough to wait until we're too weak to fight. When that happens, this place becomes a coffin." The room went quiet. The only sound was the low hum of insects outside and the faint drip of water somewhere in the outpost. Ethan crouched near Lyra. "You think you can move if I help you?" Her gaze was steady, even if her voice was faint. "If you carry me, you'll slow down. You're already poisoned human." "Doesn't matter," he replied. "I'm not leaving you." For a moment, there was something unspoken between them, understanding deeper than words. Ethan's mind raced. The predators had a clear advantage in the open jungle. They could track by scent, see in the dark, and move silently. If the group tried to run the normal way, they'd never make it. But maybe they didn't have to take the normal way. He remembered the crumbling ventilation tunnels beneath the outpost. If they still connected to the old mining shafts, half a kilometer away, they could bypass most of the open terrain. It was a gamble if the tunnels had collapsed. They'd be trapped underground, but it was better than walking into a hunter's jaws. "Get ready to move," Ethan said, grabbing his pack. The aliens stared at him in disbelief. "Where?" "Down," he replied simply. He led them to a rusted grate in the floor, half hidden under debris. With effort, he pried it open, the metal groaning loudly in protest. The stale, cold air from below carried a hint of damp earth. "We go through here," Ethan explained. "The predators won't follow easily underground." One alien hesitated. "Won't or can't?" Ethan didn't answer. He helped Lyra down first, lowering her gently into the darkness. She winced as her injured leg brushed the edge of the opening, but she didn't make a sound. One by one, the others followed. Ethan went last, pulling the grate closed above them. The tunnels were narrow, forcing them to crouch as they moved. Old lights flickered weakly along the walls, but most were dead. The air was heavy, and every drip of water echoed like a drum. Halfway through, Ethan heard something that made his stomach turn, a faint scraping sound on the metal above. The predators were following. "They know," he whispered. The group quickened their pace. The tunnels twisted left and right, the air growing colder. Ethan's legs ached with every step, his body screaming at him to stop, but he pushed forward. Lyra leaned against him for balance, her weight light but constant. Then they reached the first collapse. A section of the tunnel had caved in, leaving only a narrow gap at the top where light filtered through. Beyond it, the passage continued. Ethan shoved his rifle through first, then guided Lyra toward the opening. "You go ahead." "I can't," she said, shaking her head weakly. "Yes, you can," he insisted, giving her a boost. She squeezed through, the others helping pull her from the other side. Ethan was halfway through himself when the sound came again, this time from inside. the tunnels behind them. He turned his head just in time to see a dark shape moving low to the ground. Its glowing amber eyes locked on him. The predator had found another way in. Move. One of the aliens hissed from ahead. Ethan pulled himself through the gap, scraping his shoulders raw on the jagged metal edges. As soon as he was clear, they shoved debris into the opening, trying to block the path. The predator slammed against the barrier from the other side, the metal bending inward. The force made the entire tunnel shake. Go, go, Ethan urged, grabbing Lyra and pushing forward. The final stretch of the tunnel was flooded ankle-deep with cold water. Their footsteps splashed loudly, masking the growls from behind but not the fact that the predator was still coming. At last, a faint blue light appeared ahead the exit. They emerged into an overgrown mining shaft. The cool night air sharpened their lungs, but they weren't safe yet. From the trees beyond, 2 more sets of amber eyes appeared. The predators had guessed their route. Ethan raised his rifle, his heart pounding. Lyra gripped his sleeve, whispering, "We can't outrun them." "I know," he said grimly. "So we'll make them regret chasing us." And with that, he stepped forward into the moonlight, ready for the fight that was about to come. The mining shaft opened into a clearing, the moon casting silver light across the broken ground. The air was damp and cold, but the tension made it feel suffocating. Ethan stood in front of the group, his rifle raised, eyes fixed on the 2 predators stalking toward them. They moved like liquid shadows, smooth, deliberate, and without a sound except for the occasional crunch of gravel under their clawed feet. Their amber eyes glowed with an unsettling intelligence, never breaking contact with their prey. Behind Ethan, Lyra leaned against a rock for balance, her breathing uneven. The other aliens clustered together, whispering in panic. One of them hissed, "We can't fight them. We'll all die." Ethan didn't look back. "If we run, we will die. If we fight, maybe we don't." The predators began to spread out, circling to trap them. One moved left, the other right. The silent coordination told Ethan everything. These weren't just beasts. They were hunters with strategy. The venom still burned in his veins, making his muscles sluggish, but adrenaline cut through the haze. He stepped forward, planting his feet. The first predator lunged. Ethan fired. The rifle's blast echoed through the night, the bullet striking its shoulder. It let out a screeching roar, staggering back, but the wound only made it angrier. The second predator used the distraction to rush in from the side. Ethan spun, trying to aim, but his reflexes were slowed by the poison. Claws slashed toward him. He barely blocked with the rifle, the metal groaning under the force. The blow sent him sprawling, the rifle tumbling from his grip. The predator loomed over him, its jagged teeth snapping inches from his face. "Ethan?" Lyra's voice was sharp despite her weakness. She reached to her belt and pulled free the small, alien blade he'd given her earlier. Summoning what strength she had, she hurled it toward him. The blade spun through the air, catching the moonlight. Before Ethan snatched it mid-roll, the predator lunged again, but this time Ethan twisted aside, slashing upward. The blade sliced across its face, drawing a spray of dark, steaming blood. The creature howled, stumbling back. The first predator had recovered and was charging again, but now Ethan's blood was on fire with determination. He grabbed his fallen rifle, flipped it to hold like a club, and swung hard into the creature's jaw. The impact sent it reeling. "Stay behind me," he barked to the others. But the predators weren't giving up. One darted low, aiming for his legs, while the other leaped high, claws outstretched. Ethan dropped to one knee, jamming the rifle barrel upward into the leaping predator's chest, firing at point-blank range. The force knocked it back with a screech. The low one slammed into him from the side, its claws raking across his armor. Pain shot through his ribs, but he held his ground. He drove the butt of the rifle into its skull again and again until it staggered back. His breaths came in ragged gasps. His vision tunneling. The venom, the fight, and the weight of exhaustion were pushing him past his limit. But then he heard Lyra's voice, steady now, fierce. "They fear fire. Give me the flare." He tossed her one from his belt. With shaky hands, she struck it to life, the red light casting wild shadows across the clearing. The predators hissed and backed away from the heat. Ethan seized the moment. Move. Now. The group scrambled toward a narrow rocky path at the far side of the clearing. The predators followed, but the flare kept them just far enough back. Ethan covered the retreat, firing short bursts to slow their advance. Halfway down the path, the flare sputtered. The predators saw it dimming and charged. "Go!" Ethan shouted, planting himself in the center of the trail. The narrow space meant only one predator could attack at a time. The first barreled toward him, its roar shaking the air. Ethan braced, gripping the blade in one hand and the rifle in the other. As it lunged, he sidestepped, slamming the blade deep into its side. The creature shrieked, thrashing violently. He yanked the weapon free, ducking just in time as the second predator leaped over its wounded packmate. The impact knocked him against the rocky wall, his vision flashing white. He swung the rifle like a hammer, smashing it into the predator's jaw. It stumbled, giving him just enough time to grab Lyra's arm and drag her the last few meters to the narrow exit. The predators stopped at the entrance, snarling but not crossing. The rocks here were sharp and unstable, too risky for their massive frames. Ethan collapsed to one knee, gasping for air. Lyra knelt beside him, her hand trembling as it rested on his shoulder. "You shouldn't be alive," she whispered. He gave a tired smirk. "People have been telling me that for years." Behind them, the predators paced at the edge of the clearing, their glowing eyes fixed on the humans and aliens who had dared to fight back. Ethan knew this wasn't over. But for now, they had survived. And that was enough. The first light of dawn painted the jagged cliffs in shades of gold and pale blue. The air was damp and cool, carrying the smell of wet stone and crushed leaves. Ethan sat with his back against the rocky wall, one knee bent, the other stretched out. His chest rose and fell heavily with each breath, the venom still burning in his veins like a slow fire. Lyra sat beside him, her injured legs stretched out and wrapped in makeshift bandages. She looked less pale than she had hours ago, but her body still trembled from the venom's lingering grip. The violet of her eyes had softened, no longer clouded by fear, but by something Ethan couldn't quite name. The others were scattered nearby, keeping watch in shifts. No one spoke loudly. Sound carried far in these cliffs, and predators often returned to hunt at dawn. Ethan tilted his head back against the stone, letting the cool air soothe his overheated skin. His hands still shook faintly from exhaustion, but he kept his rifle across his lap. Sleep could wait. "You stayed awake all night," Lyra murmured quietly, her voice still weak but steadier than before. He gave her a faint smirk. "Someone had to make sure we didn't get eaten in our sleep." She studied his face for a long moment, her gaze searching. "You were poisoned. You could barely stand after the fight, and yet you stood in front of me every time they came." Close. Ethan shrugged lightly. Didn't think about it. Just felt like the right thing to do. Her lips pressed together as if she wanted to say something more, but couldn't find the words. Finally, she looked down at her hands. "My people, the Arnile. We don't believe in life debts the way humans do. But there's something older, something we almost never speak of. If someone saves your life at the cost of their own, they become part of you, bound forever." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Sounds serious." "It is," she said, her eyes meeting his again. "And whether you meant to or not, you've bound yourself to me." He wasn't sure what to say to that. For a man who'd spent most of his life avoiding deep connections, the idea of being bound to someone was unsettling. But there was no mockery in her voice, only quiet certainty. The faint hum of an engine in the distance cut through the still air. Ethan's head snapped up. "Rescue one of the aliens," said in relief, standing to wave toward the sound. A low-flying shuttle appeared between the cliffs, its thrusters kicking up dust as it hovered closer. The silver hull bore the markings of the Arenal expedition fleet. Ethan stood slowly, ignoring the dizziness that made the world tilt for a second. He glanced at Lyra. Time to go home. When the shuttle landed, a pair of Arenal medics rushed out. Their eyes widened when they saw Ethan, pale, sweaty, and clearly unwell. But before they could lead him away, he stepped aside. "Her first," he said firmly, nodding toward Lyra. The medics hesitated, clearly unsure why the human who looked half dead was refusing treatment. But they didn't argue. They lifted Lyra carefully onto a stretcher, checking her vitals as they prepared an injection. "You need that too," one of the medics told Ethan, showing him the antidote injector. "After her," he repeated. Lyra caught his gaze from the stretcher, something unreadable in her expression. "You stubborn fool," she whispered. He smirked faintly. "Takes one to know one." The injection worked fast. Within minutes, Lyra's breathing steadied and the color returned to her cheeks. Only then did Ethan allow the medics to treat him. The antidote's cold rush through his veins was like ice melting the fire that had been burning all night. He exhaled slowly, finally feeling the tightness in his chest ease. The shuttle lifted off, carrying them away from the cliffs. From the small window, Ethan caught one last glimpse of the clearing they'd fought in. And there, at the edge of the trees, he saw them, two glowing amber eyes, unblinking, watching the shuttle disappear into the sky. Lyra followed his gaze. "They'll remember us," she said quietly. "Let them," Ethan replied. "I'll remember them too." The flight back to the main outpost was quiet. The medics worked silently, checking both of them for lingering venom effects. Lyra's hand rested on the edge of Ethan's seat, not touching him, but close enough that he could feel the faint warmth radiating from her. When they landed, Arenal command staff rushed to meet them. Several officers thanked Ethan formally, their words precise and diplomatic. But Lyra ignored the formality. She stepped closer to him and said softly, "You didn't just save my life, Ethan. You gave me something I didn't think I'd ever have again." He tilted his head. "What's that?" "Trust," she said simply. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The chaos of the landing bay carried on around them, but it felt far away. Finally, she smiled faintly, the expression rare, but genuine. "This isn't the end, human. Our paths, they're tied now." Ethan looked at her for a long moment, then gave a small nod. "Guess I can live with that." Far above the jungle planet of Verith, the shuttle's engines roared as it carried them toward safety. But Ethan had the strange feeling that this was just the beginning of something far larger than a snake bite, a jungle hunt, or even a life debt. And deep down, he knew he didn't mind at all. The outpost had returned to its usual rhythm machines humming, voices echoing down metallic corridors, the faint smell of ozone from the shuttle bays. Yet for Ethan, the world felt different. Every step he took now seemed to carry the weight of the past 2 days. Lyra's recovery was faster than the medics expected. Within a week, she could walk short distances with the help of a cane-like support. The venom had left no visible scar, though Ethan suspected it had left other marks, ones no medic could see. He saw her often, sometimes in the medical wing, sometimes leaning against the balcony rail overlooking the alien jungle, her gaze distant. But every time their eyes met, She would give him a look, a quiet acknowledgement that said more than words. Ethan had thought that once she was safe, their paths would naturally drift apart. But the opposite happened. She sought him out. Not with urgency, but with a subtle, deliberate presence. Almost like the predators that had stalked them. Only this time, he didn't mind being followed. One afternoon, as the twin suns dipped low over Vareth's horizon, she found him in the outpost's hangar. He was cleaning his rifle, checking the mechanisms out of habit more than need. "You're leaving," she said. It wasn't a question. Soon, he admitted. Got another job lined up off-world. Transport escort. She stepped closer, her silver skin catching the warm light. "Your species. You keep moving, even when you've almost died. Why?" He shrugged, keeping his eyes on the rifle. "Because stopping means thinking too much about the times we almost didn't make it." She studied him for a moment before speaking again. "Among my people, there is an old saying, the one who stands between you and death is part of your shadow forever." Ethan set the rifle down and looked at her. "So, I'm your shadow now." A faint smile tugged at her lips. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I'm yours." Silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable, but heavy with the unspoken. Ethan broke it with a low chuckle. "Guess that means if I get into trouble again, you're obligated to show up and save me." "Not obligated," she said softly. Willing. Before he could reply, the hangar loudspeakers crackled. "Unscheduled shuttle inbound. All personnel. Prepare for possible contact." Ethan's muscles tensed automatically. Lyra tilted her head, her expression sharpening. They both moved toward the observation platform, where the vast jungle stretched endlessly below. From the horizon, a black shape rose, sleek and predatory. It wasn't one of the aeronal ships. Its hull bore no markings, and its flight pattern was too erratic for a standard approach. "That's not friendly," Ethan muttered. The outpost commander's voice cut through the loudspeakers. "Unknown vessel, you are entering restricted airspace. Identify yourself immediately." No response. Ethan felt the hairs on the back of his neck rise. His instinct screamed that this wasn't random. Whoever or whatever was coming, they had a purpose. And if experience had taught him anything, it was that trouble rarely showed up without a reason. Beside him, Lyra's gaze narrowed. "There. Hunting something. Or someone," Ethan said grimly. The shuttle descended toward the landing pads. Armed security gathered below, their weapons trained on the vessel. The air grew tense, thick, as the shuttle's hatch hissed open. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a tall figure in dark armor stepped out, followed by two others. Their movements were deliberate, calculated. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Mercenaries?" Lyra's voice was almost a whisper. "They're here for me." He turned to her sharply. "How do you, my family?" she said quickly. "Not by blood, by politics. They'll see me as a liability now. Weak. A snake bite, a rescue by a human. To them, it's shame." Ethan didn't like the way her voice cracked on that. "Last word. Then they're going to have to get through me first." Down below, the mercenaries began to move toward the hangar entrance. Security shouted warnings. "Cure!" But Ethan Newman like that didn't stop until they got what they came for. He grabbed his rifle, checking the charge. "Get somewhere safe." Lyra shook her head. "No, I'm not hiding while someone else fights." For me again. For a second, they just stared at each other. Then Ethan gave a small, resigned nod. "Fine, but stay close." The mercenaries stepped into the hangar, their weapons raised. The leader's helmet visor swept the room before locking. "On to Lyra. We've come for the aeronal girl." His voice boomed through a vocoder. "Hand her over, human. No need to make this harder." Ethan stepped in front of her, his rifle leveled. "You'll have to kill me first." The leader tilted his head slightly. That can be arranged. And in that instant, Ethan realized Vareth wasn't done with them yet. The predators in the jungle had been only the first test. Now came the kind of danger he knew to well-enchant, armed, and willing to spill blood for a payday. He glanced at Lyra, who met his gaze without fear. For the first time since the snakebite, she looked unshakable. Whatever came next, they would face it together, because somewhere between venom, predators, and survival, they had crossed an invisible line, no longer just rescuer and rescued. They were bound, and this time, Ethan thought, we're going to be the hunters.